G'day listeners! You're listening to the weekly Dartscast podcast with your co-hosts Alex Moss and Burton DeWitt. Here in Australia, we like to call something bonzo if it's awesome or it's great. So when you listen to the weekly Dartscast, you're listening to a bonza show. They have amazing guests, awesome interviews, and they'll give you all the ins and outs of the darts that you'll need this week. So sit back, relax, and it's time to get into it. Oh, check that out. 180. You beauty, mate.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss, and once again I'm joined by darts statistician and another week, another title. He is now the local legend of Shepherd to Eleanor Tinsley Park. Burton DeWitt, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. A bit proud of that one because I think that's like about a 2.5 mile segment, and third place is a good 10 or 11 runs behind me, but second place is right on my tail, so I have to keep going. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yes, a very impressive sporting achievement, and another one that we saw at the weekend was from Johnny Clayton. What a weekend for the Ferret. Johnny Clayton wins the Masters, and with it the last spot in the Premier League. Just how big could this be for Clayton's career?
Oh, it's already massive, and I can't recall, because it would have been a few years ago, whether I said it on this show, if I just said it on social media to other people, but I know I've said it. I probably did say it on this show at some point. The only person who's surprised with how good Johnny Clayton can be and is Johnny Clayton. And once he is able to, and this I'm talking now a couple of years ago, once he's able to get that confidence that he's as good as he is, he'll be not necessarily unstoppable, but truly among the elite in the game. And we've seen year on and year in, year out as well, how he's improved and gotten more confident that he is as good as he shows. The biggest flashes for the longest time were those matches on television against Michael Van Gerwen. And I think that gave him confidence. Well, I can do this against the world number one, and win or lose, I'm playing at or near the level of the world number one. Why? I know I can do that any other day. And it's taken some time, but now he has. And he was the best player this weekend. He might have been barely inside the top 20 in the world, but he was the world number one in terms of performances over the course of the weekend. The only person who was comparable was, in fact, the world number one Gerwyn Price. He deserved to win that title. And now that he knows not just can he play at that for a given match or given floor event or even a European Tour event, as he's won a couple of those, but that he could do it on television in what is considered a major. And really, when you look back to the World Cup, now has done it twice in majors, it's going to help him take that next step and do it in a ranking major. And even if not in a ranking major, in the Premier League, not necessarily win one, but be a legitimate contender in those. We saw at the back. I saw last year making a couple of ranking semifinals. Of course, we saw a few years ago when he had that big breakthrough in Minehead in the Players' Championship final, getting to the final where he lost 11-2. He was a little ahead of himself then. If he made it to the final, the Players' Championship final now, he would not be ahead of himself. He'd be playing at the level he's capable of and that he now knows he's capable of performing at. As I said, for the longest time, the only person who didn't know Johnny Clayton was this good was Johnny Clayton. Now he knows he is that good, and that's going to make a big difference. Whether or not it's his only major he ever wins, it will not be the last time he's in contention, and it will not be the last time this year. He is a force, and deservedly a force in the Premier League now.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, and the numbers from the weekend, they really do speak for themselves, don't they? 102.66 tournament average. He had the most 180s out of everyone. The checkout percentage around 46-47%. And just looking into game by game how he got to that title, he performed superbly across the whole weekend, and I don't think anyone can begrudge him picking up that title at the end of the weekend and getting that last spot in the Premier League. But just want to touch on the last leg deciders that he had. He was the first player ever to win 3 last leg deciders in one Masters. Then he goes and makes it 4 last leg deciders, and these are against the world class players. You look at the route that he's had at the weekend. His first round against Jose de Souza, last leg 12 darter on throw, 130 checkout. Second round against Michael Van Gerwen, 14 darter on throw, and in that leg 2 180s. The bottle that he showed across the whole 3 days in Milton Keynes was world class. That's the only way I can describe what he did, and even breaking the Michael Van Gerwen curse that we saw during 2020, which he actually started 12 months ago when he beat Michael in the Masters last year and then went out next round. We saw that happen countless times last year, but he goes and beats James Wade 9-6 down, runs off legs in 12, 15, 11 and 12 to win that game, and the record in a best of 19 for checkout percentage, 91%, and then you add in the other double attempts that he had as well, 12 out of 14, and then going into the final session, beating Peter Wright, the defending champion, with 104 average, beating him again in a last leg decider on throw. Then in the final, had to come back from 5-3 down, runs off 6 legs in a row, and averages 104 in one of the biggest games of your career. And okay, they said that both players didn't know that whoever won that final was going to be in the Premier League, but I think both of them could have had a fair stab that whoever won that final was going to get in the Premier League. So there was a lot of pressure on him. And yeah, we'll see where he goes from here. As you say, he's now won a singles title on TV for the first time. He's now in the Premier League. He'll be looking to push back into that top 16 now during the rest of the year and see if he can go any further. But there are a lot of players now in that top 20. Looking earlier today, 14 out of the top 20 have won a TV title of some sorts during their PDC career. So there's more players now than ever that are capable of getting over that winning line. So he's proved it to himself, 150-1 before the start of the tournament. There's no way his odds are going to be that big again for a very long time. He'll go into 2021 now full of confidence that this isn't just a one-off and that he can challenge for these big titles during the rest of the year as well.
Yeah, man. Of the 6 that haven't, 3 of them have won a televised title in the BDO. So it's not like the other 6 are just scrum in the overall competition. But let's talk about the beaten finalists. He is one of those 6 that's never won a PDC televised event, has won a few in the BDO, including the World Masters. Mervyn King falling short yet again, a second TV final in the space of just over 2 months. He's now 0-6 in PDC televised finals, 0-8 in PDC Premier finals, if you include losing a Championship League final and a German Darts Championship final back when that was a Premier event. Is he the best player not to have won a televised title in the PDC?
I think what we've seen over the last few months, getting to these 2 finals, I think he is now in that number 1 spot. Okay, he doesn't want to be in that number 1 spot. He wants to be someone that has won a televised title in the PDC. But if we're going off players that haven't got over that finishing line, some may say that Michael Smith could be in that bracket. Of course, he did win that World Series event in China. He beat Michael Van Gerwen in the semi-final, Rob Cross in the final, who was the world champion. So he beat some top quality players to win that event on TV. But you ask Michael Smith himself, he doesn't really count that. He's still looking for that first big TV title, a major if you like. So Michael Smith's in the conversation. If you take out World Series events, he's 0 out of 5. Terry Jenkins is the big one, 0 from 9. And you look at some of them finals that he had, a lot of them were one-sided against Phil Taylor, losing those games. Mervyn King, a lot of his finals have been very close. The one at the weekend was close. Of course, the one against Michael Van Gerwen a few months ago, Players' Championship finals, which went all the way, losing out 11-10. And you look at the gap between his first final, 2009 on TV, to this year, 2021, 12 years. That's a long gap between getting to these big finals. His longevity in the game, I think that does put him in that number 1 spot for me. But a few others, as I say, Terry Jenkins, Dave Chisnell's 0 from 5. Ronnie Baxter didn't get to too many finals, but he came very close in the past when he was one of the big name players in the late 90s, early noughties. And if we're going off players that have never got to a big TV final in the PDC, for me, I think given what we've seen, and 54 years of age now as well, if he'd have won that final, he would have been the oldest first-time winner of a PDC title on TV. He just keeps going. He's rejuvenated himself. He's still pushing, even after all these years playing on the game, to get that first one. So for me, I think from what we've seen over the last few months, Mervyn King now is the best player never to win a televised title in the PDC.
Did you mention Dave Chisnell in there, or did you skip over him?
I mentioned Chizzy, 0 from 5.
Okay, you mentioned him passing. Really not 7, because he also lost twice in World Series finals. And on top of that, he has another 8 televised semifinals, including this past year at the World Championships, but also twice in the World Grand Prix, in the Premier League. Actually, I guess not counting the World Cup in there, so it would be 9 semifinals if you include the World Cup. I think there's a big argument for Chizzy, beyond the fact that he is currently the highest ranked player. It is those 7 televised finals, 8 televised semifinals that he's been defeated in, and I don't think I can count how many quarterfinals it is. It's that he's there or thereabouts in every single event, and overall now, he has won a total of 16 PDC events. That is one more than anyone else has without having won a televised title. I think you have to throw Chizzy in on that same level as Terry Jenkins, Mervyn King. Ronnie Baxter, fewer finals, but he also has 15 titles in the PDC, so has a lot of titles, even though he wasn't able to go through. But I'm gonna throw out another name. You won't be surprised that I'll mention it, but I think I can actually defend it. How about Mark Walsh in this conversation? Okay, I would have to put Chizzy ahead of him and probably King and Terry Jenkins, but Mark Walsh isn't that far behind. He never really did it on television. He did make that one final in the UK Open where he lost a competitive match, but was clearly the second best player to Phil Taylor. Had that great run on debut in the Grand Slam where he made it through to the semifinals. So he's had a couple good runs on TV. But he's one of only 3 players in the history of darts to have beaten Phil Taylor in 4 ranking finals. He beat Taylor in 4 ranking finals. The only other people to do that are Gary Anderson and Michael Van Gerwen. He is one of 3 people alongside those 2 to have done that. That's how good a player Mark Walsh was on the floor for an extended period of time. While Phil Taylor was at his best, he still could only beat Mark Walsh half the time in ranking finals. That in and of itself puts him in this competition. I might be biased, but I think he deserves to at least be in that same conversation for that fact alone.
A strong argument indeed, and we've just seen 2 players outside the top 16 make the final of the Masters and create this Premier League shootout that we saw on Sunday for that last spot. But is this 24-player format and last chance spot for the Premier League here to stay now, do you reckon?
The first part of that is yes, unless they decide to expand it. And I know Chris Mason was suggesting that they expand to 32 and make it a ranking event, have a 4-player qualifier to go along with the top 28. Not a bad idea. A good way to start the season and a good way to give the new tour card holders a chance to get in. Maybe even do it differently where you have top 24 and then 2 sets of qualifiers, 4 returning tour card holders outside the top 24 and 4 for the new tour card holders to give them that opportunity right off the bat to get on television. Something like that could be a decent idea to turn this into a ranking event. But at the very least, I like it being expanded to 24. The added players, it shows the depth because this was probably the best quality event we've had. And that's not even taking into account how many last leg deciders there were across the entire tournament. Really, the final, you could say, was a letdown because it only went 11-8. But I don't see it going back to 16. I could see it going to 32 and trying to make it a ranking event, but it would need to be something unique like what Chris Mason suggested, like what I suggested, something that does differentiate it to some extent. So it's not just like those other 32 event one weekend tournaments. Playing for the Premier League, as we discussed on the show last week, it's going to be tough because of the amount of planning that has to go in to a Premier League campaign, and especially with that turnaround just a few days later. You're going to have to book a lot of travel, a lot of media experience. It's not just that you show up for the event. You show up day before for that first week for all the media stuff, and there'll be other commitments over the course of the year. It'll be tough, especially for those first few weeks, for that 10th player to be able to immediately hit the ground running and get in and get everything sorted. And sorry if there's any background noise. We're having construction here today. So you might hear people in the background. I'm doing my best to cancel out the noise, but apologies for any of that. But it'll be tough from a logistical standpoint, but it could be done, especially if you move the event move the Premier League back an extra week or so. I think it worked this year. I don't know if it will work next year. I've been a proponent of having a different type of play-in tournament for the Premier League. I think variety is the way to go, though. They need to mix it up. 2 years of the Challengers was good. Doing this was good. Maybe next year do something different. And then, a couple years from now, come back and say, this year, this spot is at the Masters, wherever does the best. I like mixing it up. I don't think that part should be here to stay per se, but I do think the 24-32 field should be.
I'm with you then. As you say, we spoke about it on the show last week when we looked ahead to the Masters, and this being the first time that we saw it, not with 16 players, but with the added 8 players to make up the 24. And you've got to say, it couldn't have gone any better, could it? You ended up with 2 players outside the top 16, 2 players that weren't in the Premier League fighting it off for that final. And we saw on the broadcast as well, just moments before the final took place, they announced that the winner of that match would get into the Premier League. They would get that 10th spot. Now, if we'd have had the semi-finals and it had gone differently, Going Price would have beat Mervyn King, Peter Wright would have beat Johnny Clayton. Then you've got two players that in the semi-finals, they went the furthest out of all the players not in the Premier League. It would have been difficult to pick between the two of them, and maybe they'd have pushed it along further down the line, maybe after Q School when a certain player gets their tour card, or maybe even further when we get to the UK Open, because the Premier League won't start before the UK Open. So it went perfectly for the PDC, and it's not going to go that way every year, is it? You're not going to have players outside the top 16 both get to the final, and the big guns like Going Price, Peter Wright, Michael van Gerwen not get to the final. It's just a shame, really, as well. The one downside, I guess, to the Premier League not starting this Thursday is when you look back to last summer when they announced the schedule for 2021, and this Thursday, when you're listening to this show tonight, would have been the start of the Premier League at the Motorpoint Arena in Cardiff, and you've got the world champion Going Price, probably would have played Gary Anderson in a rematch of that world final. You've got Johnny Clayton, who'd have been making his full Premier League debut. It would have been a great occasion, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case this year. It's been pushed back further along. I like it going up to 24 players. I did say last week about maybe going up to 32 in years to come. Having a think about it as well after watching what we saw at the weekend, and given the scheduling, of course, it'll probably stick to a weekend Friday to Sunday event. Having it maybe best of 11 in that first round, first against 32nd, second against 31st. I kind of like the way it is now, where you've got that pre-qualifier on the Friday, the players ranked 9 to 16 against 17 to 24 for the right to play one of the big eight in a longer format game on the Saturday, best of 19. So I think at the moment the format looks pretty good. Premier League, as you say, it all comes down to how the 12 months of that season play out. Top four guaranteed automatically into it. If you've got 6 other players that have won big events, you're not going to have a vacant spot, are you? So it all depends how the year goes. But if we're in a similar situation 12 months down the line, I'm all for seeing this event being classed as maybe a last chance for the players.
Now we'll move on to our first guest of the weekend. It's a former winner a long time ago on the Pro Tour, and one of the most generous people when it comes to walk-on by giving out food to everyone else. It's the Muffin Man, Steve Hine.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the Muffin Man, Steve Hine. Thanks for the time, Steve. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. As well as can be expected, I suppose, in these times.
Definitely. Well, a couple of weeks ago, it was the 16-year anniversary of your first PDC title winner in a UK Open regional event. But before then, where did your interest in darts first come from?
Well, it was really quite a funny story, really, because I used to play pool when I was about 17 years old. I was in the pub, and the pool table went up from 30 pence to 50 pence, and I wasn't happy about it. And I looked over at the dartboard, and I saw the dartboard was empty. So I went and asked the barman for a set of darts, and I started playing dart. I had my first proper throw of a dart then, and went from there, really.
Picking it up by chance, where did the journey go from there until starting in PDC events around 2004, 2005 time?
Almost instantly, I found I had an aptitude for the game, and would say within 2 months of me playing, I was picked for the local team in the pub, and obviously they was in the top division of the commentary league we was playing at the time, and the first year I won 16 out of 18 games, for basically a raw novice. Within 6 months, and I started playing Super League, which I've been playing Super League ever since. And obviously when I played county, I played for Walsh numerous times, approximately about 140 times now. Again, playing for your county is obviously massive, and they were one of the counties that stood by their players. When the PDC first split, when you weren't supposed to play county, but one of my county was one of the two that county PDC players play in the county system.
So what inspired you to then start playing in the PDC events? Obviously you've found out you've got a talent in the game very early on, playing at a local level. What prompted you then to pursue it a little bit further?
Well, what it was is that I saw the UK Open qualifiers that came up in about 2003 or whenever it was. I can't remember exactly what. It might have been 2002. I thought, a chance to play the pros on TV. I didn't really know much about the PDC, that it's, you could play in it. I didn't realise. I thought you had to be invited into it. I didn't realise you could just join it at the time. So I went to the UK Open, and the first year I went to the qualifiers, I qualified for Bolton because it was at the Reebok Stadium that year. I went there and I lost my first game 5-0. so I was out. But it gave me the taste for it, and I thought, I can do this, and went from there really. And then culminating, like, I think it might have been 2004. I can't remember exactly. But then I thought, right, I started doing some tournaments, and I started, you can join the PDC, So I joined the PDC, and I started playing a few tournaments, and then, like, within 2.5 years, I actually won that tournament, and I can still remember it as if it was yesterday. I could whip off the players one by one who I beat, and they'd all played in the World Championships, only like 3 weeks previously, and it was obviously arguably the biggest achievement of life to actually win a tournament. But obviously, since then I've done a lot, but I still hold that in very, very high regard.
Yeah, I was going to come back to that title that I mentioned in 2005. You beat the likes of Roland Shelton, Terry Jenkins, James Wade, Bob Anderson in the final. What are your memories that stick with you to that day?
The main memory is when I played the final, is that I won. I beat Bob 2-0, and he's an absolute gent, Bob. It's always has been. Everybody knows that anyway, that he's a gentleman. But I was just stood there, and I didn't know what to do. I just stood there like as if I was like dumbstruck, And he put his arms around me and said, "Look, well played, Steve. You're the best player of the day. By far. The right man won this tournament today. And to hear words like that from like I say, multiple world masters champion, the world champion, it was great. And he said to me, you ought to give it a go. So what I did from there, when I won the won that, it offended me to. I thought I'll have a go at the Las Vegas Desert Classic, because I realised you could enter that. And I went over there and I qualified for the Las Vegas Desert Classic for the TV stages, and which I lost to Colin Lloyd in the first round on TV, and that was my first real taste of the big time on TV. I thought, I really want this, and so it went on from there really, and I started playing more and more tournaments, and obviously became a regular on the PDC circuit for quite a while.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. The Las Vegas Desert Classic, you come through the qualifiers, you beat a certain Peter Wright on the way to doing so. What was it like playing? I know you played a few UK Opens up to that point, but playing on TV, all the lights, all the cameras, and everyone watching you. What was that experience like for the first time?
It was absolutely amazing. That year it was being filmed. It was being held in the MGM Garden Arena, the MGM Grand in Vegas, and it was absolutely awesome. To see your name up in 30-foot lights. I was awestruck. I was dumbstruck, and I played well against Colin, but Colin was obviously number one player in the world at the time, and he beat me 2-0. But I didn't disgrace myself, and I always remember it thinking, I watched through the games thinking, if I'd had this average, I could have won that game. But obviously, averages don't win the game, which I've learned later on. But it really gave me that taste that, I want this again, which obviously then I went on to do.
From Vegas, you played in a lot of big venues in darts, the World Match Play, Winter Gardens, of course, the World Championship, both the PDC ones that we've had, the Circus Tavern, and more recently Alexandra Palace. What has it been like turning up to those big iconic venues and getting to go up on that stage and play?
Well, as you can imagine, when I first qualified for the World Championships, I was absolutely over the moon, and I can remember it as if it was yesterday. And when I played, I know I played Chris Mason, and I remember winning the first set against him. To actually win a set against the world's top 10 player, your first time in the World Championships, I wouldn't say I started to panic, but I thought, I'm going to win this. I started to run before I could walk, and I ended up losing the 3-1. You mentioned the World Match Play. When I qualified the World Match Play, that was absolutely a dream. I played in a competition, a national finals of a competition there once, a couple of years previously, and obviously there was no stage on it. It was just like boards in the room. And I thought, what a fantastic room this is. And then 2 years later, I was playing there, live on TV, and like I say, that's when I really started my my Muffin Man persona, I suppose, because I was the first time I really threw muffins out to the crowd. I took a box of muffins with me. At the time, it was literally just muffins in a box, and I gave chuck muffins out to the crowd on the way up. Obviously, what it was, Sky christened me in Muffin Man, because obviously I don't even realise I make muffins for a living. I work for a muffin factory, so hence the name Muffin Man. So it's grown a bit since then, obviously, with my walk on and that, but it's stuck with me. It's a great nickname to have. So I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah,
I was going to mention the Muffin Man nickname, of course, and the walk on. A lot of darts fans will remember that walk on, especially the ones that you've had at the World Championship in the past and throwing the muffins out. I mean, previously we've had Ted Anke throwing the bats out at Lakeside, but throwing the muffins out, how did that all come about, getting to do that?
Obviously, like I say, I made muffins for a living, and obviously, I'm proud of the stuff that I make, It just seemed ideal. I just thought, I could give my fans a muffin because people used to say to me, you got a muffin, and I thought, I think people would love a muffin, do you know what I mean? And so I started to throw muffins out, and obviously then he went on to putting an apron on, and then people wanted hats, you know what I mean? But I wanted to keep it exclusive, so when I got the hats, I didn't really have loads of them. I just used to give them away because they're more exclusive. Because obviously I didn't do it for any commercial reason. It was to invent my persona, I suppose. And I actually enjoyed, doing it. And obviously now if I had a pound for every time somebody said to me, "Have you got a muffin?" I'd be a millionaire. It'd be a great life. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, touching on some of the World Championships that you've had, and you've played some of the greats on that stage, Phil Taylor and Raymond Van Barneveld, back-to-back years at Ali Pali. What an experience that must have been to play two of the all-time greats of the game in the biggest tournament there is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I played Phil, it was actually in the second round because I'd actually won my first game. And then I realised when the draw came out that if I won the first game, I was going to be playing Phil. And obviously playing Phil's an absolute dream. He's the governor, he is the man, he's my sporting idol. Obviously everybody aspired to be Phil Taylor, as you joined the PDC, because he was the man and he dominated the game for a lot of years. I then, obviously I played Roland. I beat Roland in the first round, and I remember having my interview, and they said, won't it ruin your Christmas now having to play Phil Taylor the day after Boxing Day? And I goes, no, not a chance. I mean, it's a dream come true. I've played in the World Championship. I've won a game live on Sky, and then I'm going to come back after Christmas to play the governor in his own backyard. Do you know what I mean? And it was a dream, And I went there, I played him, and like I say, I won 3 legs against him, and he was just awesome, to be the frank word. And I can remember, I think it was Scott Giblin when I came off stage, and he said something. He said, Phil only averaged 103 only. You know what I mean? And that's how far clear he was at the time of anybody else. He only averaged 103. And like I say, I can't say higher praise to Phil Taylor about his darting ability. He is the man. As you mentioned Barney, I can remember playing Barney, and it's again, that was a game I probably let slip. Really, I could have won that game. It's all about lack of concentration in the game sometimes. The pros are that good now that they can blank everything out. And I can remember, I'm there playing Barney, and there's Batman and Robin being chased by security, but I shouldn't really be seeing that, should I? Do you know what I mean? And, I just had happy times. The Alexandra Palace. I want to get back there again. There's no reason why I can't. Like I say, it's when the PDC first had the World Championships there. People thought, but I tell you, it's an iconic venue now, and I can't see it moving from there, to be honest with you.
Definitely. Well, let's look back at the last 10 years and a lot of changes to the PDC, obviously, from when you first joined. 2011, we had the tour cards introduced and Q School. We've had the European Tour come about as well. What have you noticed have been the main changes, really, from when you first started PDC darts to what it's like now?
The main change instantly is the standard. The standard is, people can say it's rocketed through the roof, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. You see young kids now, when I say young kids, 18, 19-year-olds banging in 100 averages, and they have no fear, no respect for anybody. They'll just go up and they'll beat anybody. They're that good. The system that the PDC have brought in via the development tour, and more recently the junior development tour, JDC, it's been fantastic. The World Youth Championship they held, the winners they've had of that, it's brought a lot of players through. I can remember being, in Bolton, staying behind sometimes, on a Pro Tour weekend, watching people like Michael Smith play, and I thought, okay, he is absolutely fantastic. And you realise, he's 18, and, he's banging 100 averages for fun. Obviously, everybody could see that he was special, but there's a lot of other, I remember Aaron Monk was another one. And obviously, more recently, being the ones come through like Ted Everett, Jeffrey Desran, we've got on that development tour. And now, and obviously more recently, obviously Keane Barry. He's going to be special. The JDC now, is gearing people up to play on that development tour. I mean, the PDC are doing an absolutely fantastic job with what they're doing, and people doubted it at the time, the PDC are out to make money, that's all they want to do, but they're not. They are building for the future, and they're producing superstars now, ready, at the age of the early 20s, they're superstars, and there's a lot of money in darts now. You can actually make a career in darts, by being a good player. And I remember when I first joined and you had to travel to Holland to win £50. Now it's nothing like that at all. It's a different ball game completely. You can plan your year around playing darts if you get to a certain level, which is obviously it's still a dream of mine. There's no reason why I can still play. It's all down to consistency. But I mean, it's a winner. First and foremost, I've got to go and get my tour card again. It's really, really tough, as everybody knows.
Come back to Q School in a moment, but one of the most recent times that we've seen you on TV is, of course, the Players' Championship Finals, end of 2017, and one of the biggest upsets in recent times, it's got to be said. Peter Wright, the third seed, you went in as the 62nd seed. You beat him 6-5 on that Minehead stage. What a special moment, and again, it just goes to show that you've got the ability to mix it with the best there is.
Of course, I played Peter that day. And I did tell people, that Peter is a friend of mine, and Peter was like a kind of a similar player to myself, that he's a similar age, and we've been on the PDC tour for a long, long time, doing okay, having appearances in the World Championships and other comps and that, but Peter's standard went from, probably 6-7 years ago, he went to another level. He became one of the superstars of the game, which obviously Richard's the world champion last year, and obviously, when I played him, I really had no fear of Peter Wright. I wasn't thinking, I'm playing number 2 seed, Peter Wright, or number 3 to wherever he was. I believed I could beat. I know Peter. I've beaten him before. He'd give me a few beans as well, but I went on the stage believing, and as the match turned out, it was a very good game. We both averaged high 90s, and last leg I had the darts, and I managed to come out on top. My biggest regret about that, not winning, but is my next game, when I lost my next game, because I had a massive chance to have a really good run in that tournament, and I felt as if I let the occasion get to me a little bit, and there's something I've got to really work on and take into account next time if it happens again.
Well, let's look ahead then, and you are getting ready for another stab at Q School. You've been through it a few times, you got your tour card a couple of times in the past, but I want to look back to 12 months ago, and probably the closest you've come to getting a tour card without actually getting it. What do you remember about what happened 12 months ago, because you came so close to getting back on the tour?
What do I remember about it? Oh, well, I remember that I thought I'd got the tour card, and I knew I can't remember the guy who I'd beat. I beat a guy in the round before I played Adamant, and I thought I'd done enough to get through. I didn't know the rules had changed this year, because the reason why I thought I'd qualified is because of all the previous years, they had like a countback system, so whoever wouldn't last jumped to anybody else, if you know what I mean. So I picked a minimum of 5 points on the last day. So that's put me like top of all the 10 people on 10, and I knew my leg difference was pretty good as well, which it was, and it was done on legs 1, and as everybody knows, it's a famous story. I lost out by 1 leg. One, not leg. My leg difference was better, but legs won, and that was the rule. And there was no count back in it. I just didn't realise, and I thought I'd won. When I played Adam, I lost that game 5-4. Again, I should have won that game. I didn't, but I still thought I'd qualified. And when to find out that I'd lost out by 1 leg, I was absolutely devastated. I thought, what am I going to do now? Challenge Tour was the week after. I couldn't pick myself up for that at all. I really tried, because I was so down. I thought, push myself, and then I decided, right, I'm going to play in a couple of BDO comps, because I'd done like a holiday camp one in the start of the year before. But I decided, right, I went to the Scottish Open, and there was like over 700 people there, and I managed to lose. I lost in the final to Jim Williams, and that gave me the belief again, like that I can play this game, and obviously since then it's been gearing up to Q School this year, put it right, and get my tour card.
Definitely. Well, we've been chatting to one of your sponsors, Loxley Darts, and they've been saying that you've been playing a little bit of online darts recently as well, and the times that we're in, it's going to be very unusual circumstances for how Q School's going to be held this year. But how has the preparation gone for getting ready for next week?
Yes. Online darts, my preparation's been going great. I've been playing fantastic. I played a couple of online sites, the official isolation knockouts. Jacob Cooks, who runs a competition virtually every night of the week between him and a guy called Alan Austin for his Fatal Darts. And culminating just recently, last weekend just gone, they ran a competition starting every 2 hours for 36 hours. And I entered 8 of them over the weekend, because obviously that's good practice. And I managed to win 3 of them. And you're playing, a lot of PDC pros playing them. There's, I'm going to name names, but, there's a lot, they're allowed to play in it. And obviously, playing online is not the same as playing somebody face to face, but you're still playing somebody and they can see what you're doing. There's no, it's better than playing against yourself, and it's really, really good practice. And I urge anybody in these times, because this lockdown's not going away that quickly, so people need to still play darts. It's a great way of talking to people, making new friends and keeping up with old friends.
You're going to be in the first group of players starting on Monday, the first stage. This is another thing about why Q schools are going to be different this year. They've split up to make sure they can keep the numbers as low as possible. How do you feel about the changes? Because you're going to have to end up playing a lot more games this year if you are going to get your tour card back.
Personally, I think this year, what they've done this year to actually get Q school on is a fantastic achievement by the PDC. The way they've written this year, they've had to do something, and they've come up with this idea, and I think it's good, because obviously we all have a chance to get a tour card. I also think going forward, the PDC might keep this in place, because it'll reward people that have had a tour card, that literally, you don't fall off the edge of a cliff, So if the people do lose a tour card, they go back to the last 1, 2, 8 to try and qualify, and also the people that got the top 16 on the development tour and the top 16 on the challenge tour, it gives you something to play for the people that don't get the tour card this year to get into that later stage of Q school. The hard part is obviously, it's a totally random draw with the players that they've split up, and people argue that one half is tougher than the other. At the end of the day, there's 40 odd places there from 180 people. You've got to get through that first, and when you're in that elite 1, 2, 8, you know that every game you're going to play is going to be a good player. I think it's a good way of sorting out the tour card, personally, and I think it's here to stay. I think it's one of the things that's been forced on the PDC, but I think they'll keep it. Yeah,
I've got to agree with you on that. And lastly, I guess it's going to be, if you are going to get your tour card back, you've done it a couple of times before via Q school, but it's going to be different for you. You're going to have to come through that first stage and then have to wait a few days to then start playing again. But what would it mean to get your tour card back and be back on the tour this year and next year at least?
Of course, it means everything. I mean, obviously, that's what I've geared my whole year for this year. Like I say, I was gutted. I was devastated last year. I still feel as if I've got a very good game in me and I can beat anybody on my day. Obviously, you need a lot of consistency now, and if you get a bit of the rub of the green in the right tournaments, you can have life-changing events that can change your life now, where you can go to a certain tournament to win like thousands of pounds, and then you can take the chance of thinking, do I want to try and take my career further and playing all the tournaments? You can plan your year around, winning now. It's a dream, doing that, but it's not a dream of me getting a tour card. I really do believe I've got a fantastic chance of getting it. I'm playing very, very well. I feel a lot confident. The new darts I've got off Loxley, they've made for me. I can't thank them enough. There's no excuse for my equipment, no excuse for me. It's down to me to perform now at Q School, and I believe I will.
Excellent. Well, Steve, wish you all the best for Q School next week. Hope it goes well for you. Appreciate your time, and whatever happens this year, wish you all the best for 2021.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks to Steve for joining us this week. Now, let's look ahead, because it's Q School time. We're talking about Q School after the Masters. Usually it's the other way around, but for obvious reasons, this year everything got inverted, and Q School will start on Monday, the first phase of Q School, and the first part of the first phase, since it'll have to be split up into 2 different parts. And I think there's only one place to start with that, and it's Raymond Van Barneveld making a comeback in the European Q School. Do you think the 5-time former world champ will win his tour card back?
I think he does. 4 months now since he announced that he's going to be making a return. It was around September time. There was a big thing about it. The PDC, they put a lot out on social media on their website, a sensational return for the 5-time world champion. And we know he gave up his tour card at the end of 2019. That was his farewell year. He had the Premier League, the World Series, a lot of invites, and it ended in such disappointment for him. That defeat to Darren Young, we missed out on a clash with Jeffrey Desvan in the next round, and the potential fairy tale big run at Ali Pali. And 2020 has been a difficult year for a lot of people. For Raymond Van Barneveld, no exhibitions, no personal appearances, and he said back in September that he misses it terribly. Now, let's see how he gets on at Q School, because he's going to have to start from scratch now. It's not a case of when he switched over from the BDO to the PDC, there was no such thing as tour cards back in 2006, no such thing as Q School, but now he has got to start right from scratch. And with this new format as well, the 2 stages, it's not a case of him turning up for the first day of Q School, going through the field and picking up a tour card and job done. It's going to be a lot more effort for him. He's got to start in the first stage, and looking at how the field of entries have been split up, he will be involved in that first block of the first stage. So 1A starting on Monday, 3 days of action. And I think the way the format's been done for this year, it gives him a better chance, because you've got the better players, if you like, the players that have dropped off the tour, the players that have done well on the development tour and challenge tour. They've all got that buy through to the final stage. So for Barney, really, it's a case of the draw's got to be good for him. There are some quality players still in that field for the first stage, but not as many as if they'd have all been put together. So he's got a better chance of a nicer draw across the 3 days. He's got 3 bites of the cherry to get through. Hasn't necessarily got to go all the way on one of those 3 days. Just pick up enough points and he'll get through to that final stage. And I think shaking off the cobwebs as well, because it will be a long time for him and a lot of players since they've played in-person darts and tournaments of this magnitude. So he's got 3 days there to blow off any cobwebs and get himself ready for that final stage, because there will be a lot of eyes on him. Okay, maybe not as many as a normal Q School when you've got 300 and 350 players and their guests and everything all watching his board. With all the restrictions at the moment, there's less people in the venue at one time. They're probably not going to let 100 odd people stand there and watch his games. They're going to be telling you, guys, you've got to shift away, social distancing, you can't be watching other people on the board. So he can kind of go under the radar at the venue, maybe not people watching it online, but I think at the venue he should go under the radar a little bit. There won't be many people watching him as we'd have probably expected. I think he gets through the first stage, and I think he gets through the final stage as well. I do expect him to get that tour card. It's going to be more difficult for the final stage, of course, but I think once he's got those first games out of the way, any butterflies, any nerves, because there will be some, I think he'll be good enough to get that tour card in the final stage.
Yeah, I at least agree for the first stage. I think he has to be favorite to get through that first stage, because he is a class above most of the people there. Even though we don't know exactly how he's playing right now, he hasn't played competitively in over a year now, but that's also the case from a lot of players in this field. But that said, his experience, assuming he's motivated and assuming he's in anywhere near his best form, is still a class above most of the people in this portion of the Q School draw. That said, there are people he could draw first match and lose to. Boris Koltsov, former world number 1 Richard Veenstra, assuming it's the same Richard Veenstra. There are 2 Richard Veenstras. I'm assuming that is the one who's the former world number 1. How about Adam Gavlas, who's in that portion as well? A young player who is expected to be the Czech Republic's long-term real chance to be a breakthrough player, although they do already have a pretty darn good player on the tour from what we saw at the back end of last year. But Gavlas is in there as well. Chris Landman, who was a top BDO player, and there's a few others. It's not going to be a cakewalk, and there are players who, even if Barney's playing well, could beat him first match. But there are also just as many people in here that you would expect Barney to get past. But that's not going to be the case when you get to the second stage. And there are a lot of very, very good players, not just who lost a tour card, but also coming from that second group as well, which I think might be the slightly harder of the groupings that can deny him a tour card. And he's going to have to be on. He's either going to have to be really good and win outright on a given day, or he's going to have to be on for multiple days, because it's going to be tough to come through that order of merit, because it's only going to be, about 13 or 14 players, not even less than that, I think, that are going to win through the order of merit at the European Q School. So he's going to need to be on at least 2 days, probably 3 days, if he doesn't win a card outright. And he's capable of it. But I don't know if he's I just don't think he's going to manage to do it. I think there's just too many players who I would pick over him right now. And the question is, how's he going to respond to adversity? If he goes out first round, if he gets a tough draw, or if he misses some darts and loses, how's he going to respond the next day? Because we've seen him in the past just skip Pro Tour weekends when things aren't going well. He doesn't have that option here. He's going to have to understand and know that it could go really bad the first day, and he's going to have to come out the next couple of days. He can do it. He's probably the most talented player of those in the field, even if he's not at his best. But I just don't think he's going to win a tour card. I think he'll be competitive, but I don't think he'll win it.
Let's switch focus to the UK Q School. Another strong field. We've got the likes of Jim Williams, Scott Mitchell, Danny Baggish, Robert Thornton, the all-time great. Who are you backing to win a tour card from the UK Q School?
Unfortunately, I can't say Mark Walsh this time because he's not entered this year. Hopefully, Walshy returns next year. In fact, none of the Mark W's, I believe, are entered because Mark Wilson is giving it a skip this year, and Mark Webster is as well. So no Mark W's that well, maybe there's some Mark W's, but none of the three that have been former tour card holders. It's just so difficult to pick. And I mean, of the ones you mentioned, I would love to see Danny Baggish win it. It's been a decade since an American had a tour card, and Danny Baggish has shown that he's good enough. And he's not the only American who's shown that he's good enough. But I think once he's played on the tour for some period of time, he will only get better. He has not just the talent, but also the drive. And I think if he wins a tour card, he'll be a challenger to get one of those automatic qualifying spots to the World Championships, probably in his first year and definitely by his second year. Of the others, I mean, Scott Mitchell had a great first season in the PDC, even though he didn't have a tour card, having a very good first weekend in the Challenge Tour, getting to most of the Players' Championship events and holding his own in it. But it shows that there's no guarantees. There are absolutely no guarantees at Q School. I mean, Scott Waits had to win through on the final day last year to get his, and Glen Durrant barely got his 2 years ago. I think that in and of itself tells you how difficult it is to predict this. Durant having to survive multiple mismatched starts from Matthew Dennant on the final day. Otherwise, Durant wasn't going to have a tour card. And, well, he's only gone and made 4 major semifinals since then and won the Premier League and won a few other PDC events. And he barely got his tour card. I don't know. I can't pick anyone individually to win it. And that's the hard thing about saying Barney. I don't think Barney's going to win it because it's so difficult to pick. I think really for everyone, I can honestly say I don't think they're going to win it because I don't think there's a single player who there's greater than a 50% chance of winning. Therefore, I don't think anyone will win a tour card.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you just got to look back at previous years. There's been so many big names that have entered Q School, they've dropped off the tour or they've tried to make the switch over and it's not gone according to plan. I mean, you look at the likes of Jamie Hughes, Christoph Ratajski, they both missed out first time round. It's not a guarantee that however good you are going to get that tour card. I know we've just spoke about Raymond Van Barneveld, but he is arguably the most high profile player that we've ever seen go to Q School. He does garner a lot of attention, and as we know, he's got a lot of ability. But looking at the UK Q School, there's a lot of big names in there, as we've touched upon, and even in normal times, a lot of sacrifice for these players like Danny Baggish coming over from America and Matt Campbell from Canada as well. In normal times, making that sacrifice, coming over to try to get that tour card at Q School. But even more so now under these current restrictions, as we know, I think Danny's come into the UK today. He'll be isolating and obviously testing because that's what everyone has to do now. If you're coming over to the UK, you've got to show the negative test for the virus. And I think there's other things as well, like quarantining when you get back or quarantining when you get here, all that sort of stuff. I don't know. It's too much for me to try and understand it all. But I just know that there's a lot more sacrifices that these players travelling from far and wide across the world have to do now. And for that reason, I'm hopeful that they have a good week, a good weekend or whatever. A few others as well. We've got to give a mention to Wayne Warren's going to be going into Q School for the first time. He gave it a miss last year. A lot was on his mind, of course, because he just won the BDO World Championship and found out about the prize money being cut. so he wasn't in the right frame of mind to enter it. But 12 months on, he's going to be giving it a go. So I really hope he has a good week. John O'Shea as well, of course, the last ever World Master. Hope he has a good week. Diogo Portela as well. It'd be great to see someone from Brazil get that tour card, and just continuing to spread the word on darts, him getting a tour card, I think would be great. Robert Thornton and Jamie Lewis as well. He had a good World Championship, unexpectedly come through that PDPA qualifier. If he can carry on the form that he showed in that qualifier and the World Championship, I think he's got a good shot as well. So a lot of players. We could list so many because there are so many that are capable, but it's going to be a really entertaining week. Usually we only get 4 days of Q School. This year we've got 10. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
Yes, indeed. And now we talked about Glen Durrant at Q School. Now we'll go on and hear from our second guest, and that's Jamie Durrant. He'll be making his Q School debut this Monday.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of this year's debutants at Q School, Jamie Durrant. Thanks for the time, Jamie. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thanks very much. How are you?
Doing well, and appreciate the time. And let's start with your name. We know that Glen Durrant, the Premier League champion, is a relation to you. What is the relation between you and Glen?
It's my uncle. It's my dad's brother.
So the last 5 years we've seen your uncle rise through the ranks in the BDO, make the switch to the PDC and become a top 16 player. Was it watching Glen that got you into darts, or is it something that's run through others in the family as well?
It actually was, yeah. It was about his second or third title he'd won with the BDO that actually got me into the practicing. I've never really looked at darts before, and I think it was just an eye-opener seeing somebody so close to home making such a success of herself that inspired me to pick the darts up, to be fair.
We often speak to the players, but what's it like as family watching Glen on TV or at the venues and seeing him in those big games? Because you guys must go through quite a lot watching all the games and how close they go sometimes as well.
Yeah, because he doesn't like to make any games easy, does he? Every game he plays, he makes hard work of it. So, yeah, he keeps us all on the edge of our seats pretty much every game he plays. It's hard to watch, but it's good to watch at the same time. And
so you got into it around 2018 time. That was his second BDO World title. So where has your darts taken you so far? Before the virus, of course, were you playing in any leagues or local events? Just talk us a little bit about that.
I've only ever done local events. I've never actually played any Super League or county games or anything like that. Nothing big stage wise. So I don't have a lot of experience in the darts, but it's helped me a lot to get out more and meet. And I've met quite a few good lads through the darts. A few of them that are going to Q School this year as well. Best Club 6, as they call themselves. Yeah. But other than that, I've had a few local competitions. I've won a couple of them. I had loads of semi-finals. I went through a stage where all I was getting was semi-finals. A few big check-outs against some really good players. So far, I've only really had probably 6 months to a year of actual competitions because of the COVID stuff. I've never actually had a chance to get into anything league-wise or anything like that. I've only just signed up for a Super League team. I've had one pub league game, but obviously with COVID, nothing's been going ahead.
One experience I've got to bring up as well, which I've heard about, an exhibition a few years ago in Workington. Glen was there, Stephen Bunting, Lisa Ashton, Tony O'Shea. Explain what happened on that occasion.
Yeah, we went down it was just an exhibition. We went down, my brother invited me to go down, my oldest brother. So me and the wife decided we were going to go down and have a game. But I wasn't supposed to be playing him. It was actually supposed to be my older brother, Lee. It was his ticket that won the game to play Glen. But for some reason, Glen thought it was me that was meant to play him. So he'd already told everybody in the crowd that I was playing him. So I ended up getting dragged onto the stage reluctantly. I wasn't massively into darts at the time, like into playing. I always followed it, but I wasn't massively into playing. And I'm quite a nervous person, so even getting up on the stage was really uncomfortable, to be fair. But yeah, I managed to pull off a win against him.
Happy days. And what was that experience like then, getting up on the stage and playing Glen, and obviously the crowd there and everything? How did you find it?
I managed it quite well, to be honest. More than I expected. I really expected to be very, very nervous, but I actually didn't play too bad. I didn't even own a dartboard at the time when I played him. I only ever practiced when I was at work. So to get up and
I checked out an 83 in 2 darts. Treble 17, double 16. It's now my favourite checkout because of it. But it's given me a push to practice more, and it's given me a new target, so to speak. I'd love to play Glen on a big stage, which is the only way I'm going to do that is if I ever get through PDCQ school. So it's kind of given me a new goal.
Well, let's come on to Q School then. You have entered this year. Explain to us the decision that came to that, deciding to go to Q School for the first time, because it's obviously a massive decision for any player to go into it.
Well, to be honest with you, a lot of me going is down to basically I just want to play some darts. I love to play the higher level players, and obviously the best players all go to Q School, apart from obviously the best that are already through Q School. So in that aspect, that was my aim, just to get down there and play some of the top names. My decision to go was a hard one because they moved the date with the COVID. But I work a rotation, so they actually moved it to a date where I was supposed to be working. So I've had to come and start holidays and things like that, move things about to be able to go.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, rewind 3 weeks ago, it didn't look like we would see you at Q School this year due to your work commitments. It looked like what you were going to cancel. So what changed for you that meant that you could enter this year?
I managed to sort out holidays with work. I sorted out, obviously, the money situation with being off work for so long. And I spoke to a few people. Everybody thinks that my game's there to go. I don't quite believe I'm ready. Glenn will hate me saying this, but I don't believe I'm quite ready to get onto the Pro Tour, whereas the Challenge Tour could be a big help for me as in like bringing my darts on type of thing. So I managed to sort everything with work, sort the home situation out. I spoke to a few people because I kind of need reassurance more than a lot of players. I guess, because I haven't been playing that long. So to me, I think I am told I expect a lot from myself from the time that I have been playing. They all seem to think that I've got the game to at least win some games down at Q School. I'm going expecting the 3 games. If I get a win, bonus. If I don't, I'm more there for the actual Challenge Tour.
The draw's out for Q School. You're in the first block of players, so when we're talking on this Monday a week today, you're going to be playing in your first game in Q School. How are you feeling 7 days to go before it all gets underway?
Excited. I'm not as nervous as I thought I would be yet, but I think within the next couple of days, I think I will get a lot more nervous about, more so not playing the darts, more so the room of so many people. I'm not a crowd kind of person. I kind of struggle with the aspect of loads of people in one room type of thing. So I think that'll start playing on my mind a lot closer to the date. But yeah, I'm really excited to get down there and just get to play some darts.
Definitely. Well, just on that, I mean, it's going to be a little bit different. You wouldn't have experienced it in previous years, but with the new format, of course, previous years we'd have 600 odd players in a room, but with the split in how the format's going to work this year, you're going to have less players in the venue in that respect. So how does this week leading up to it look right now in terms of practice, work-wise, and obviously heading up to Milton Keynes this weekend?
Well, like I say, my work-wise, I work rotations. I work 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, so I don't have any work at the minute to worry about. My game is probably the best I've ever played at the moment. That's what made me, that was like the final nail in the coffin to say, right, I'm going for it, because I am playing as good as I've ever played. I'm more confident in my darts than I've ever played. So that kind of made me think, right, I'm going for it.
We've seen on Twitter as well, you had a lot of support, some nice messages, good luck wishes from everyone. What does that support mean to you, still early on in your darts career, just starting out? What does that support mean to get all their messages come through?
It does mean a lot. It means a lot that everybody else has got a lot of confidence in me. I know a lot of it comes from the name, the Durant name, because I am carrying a lot of pressure with Glen's achieved so much in such a short time. people might be expecting more than what I can deliver. But hopefully I can give people enough of my game type of thing that hopefully I don't get down there and absolutely make a mess of it, you know what I mean? And people say I've wasted my money, because that's not what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming to play my best game. If it's good enough, it is. If it isn't, then there's always next year, and I'll have another year to practice with challenge tours and everything else.
Definitely. Well, we did have a question come in from Glenn. He would like to know, Jamie, why you don't throw a Glen Durrant dart.
I actually beat him with a Glen Durrant dart. I don't know. I've probably tried 3 different types of darts, but I've always gone back to my original dart that my missus bought me for Father's Day. It was the first ever set I've owned. It's still the same set. The only difference is I put points on with grip on now. So I think even if I did try Glen's darts, I probably still wouldn't stick with them.
Yeah. Jamie, really appreciate your time. Wish you all the best for Q School next week. Hope it all goes well, and appreciate your time and best wishes for 2021.
Cheers, mate. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks to Jamie for joining us this week. Now we'll finish up, as we not always, but almost always do, with some listener questions. We got quite a few in this time. First from a good friend of the show, John Thompson, who asks, should the PDC have considered running some online home tour style qualifiers to give the UK Open some semblance of amateur representation?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and I don't think any solution that the PDC would have come up with to replace the Riley's qualifiers would have been perfect, because I've only participated in them once, as we all know, one time Riley's UK Open qualified participant, but they are a lot of fun and unearthed a lot of talent. The likes of Rob Cross, of course, come through that qualifier in Norwich, ends up becoming a world champion, as we all know now, and others, the likes of Paul Hogan, he's come through it and picked up some scalps. Barry Lynn getting to the final day. I think an online one, yes, it would have been good to see that participation, but it would have been a lot of effort to put them on. Was there 16 qualifiers? How many entries are you going to have? Who's going to monitor it? And there's got to be that semblance of trust as well, hasn't there? Because we've seen, even with the PDC home tour, there was a lot of complaints about Jelle Klaassen. Did he hit the double top? He had to do a screenshot with a clearer camera to show that his points were in the double top to clear his name. It's just a lot to think about there, really. I think it would have been a lot of effort to put into it, and I guess really a backup, having the top players from the Q School to merit is the best they could have done this year. But I'm hopeful that we'll see the Riley's qualifiers come back next year or something similar, and we can get back that FA Cup at darts style for the UK Open, because it is a big selling point for the tournament.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I just don't think an online competition would have worked. I hope that next year they try to add additional Riley's qualifiers to make up for the missed year, and also to make up for the fact that I think the cutback from 32 to 16 does take something away from the event. I like the move to having all the tour card holders there. I also like the move to giving some representation to Challenge Tour and Development Tour players, but only having 16 Riley qualifiers does lose a little bit of that luster from the event. And even if you have to add in an extra round, even if you have to have the Riley's qualifiers play each other in that play-in round, I'm okay with that, because I like that idea of there being 32 of them in here. And actually, I don't like that idea of them having to play each other in that first round, because I think that chance to play anyone on tour is a added bonus. So I'd like to see it go back to 32 and just figure out a different way to make sure that it works. But I think that there was no way that you could have it this year, and they had to go as a one-off disappearance.
Yeah, and twice as many Riley's qualifiers gives me twice as many chances to go out in the first round as well, which would be good. Second question comes from Sam Carter, who says, would we have seen the emergence of 3 new TV major, practically a darting swear word, winners Clayton, Vandenberg and De Souza, if the events were ran as normal with a capacity crowd most nights?
It's impossible to know. We'll start with Dimitri Vandenberg. He's usually played his best darts in front of a big crowd. So it's hard to say that he wouldn't have won that event in front of a crowd. But also, it was a little bit ahead, I think, of where we thought he was at that time. I joked to his manager, because we tried to get him on right before the event. I joked to his manager, once he lifts the trophy next week, you have to make sure he comes on. And lo and behold, he did win it. But it did seem just a little bit ahead of schedule. But it was something that was always coming. De Souza, I don't know, but he did win in front of a, albeit smaller crowd, just a few weeks earlier on the European tour. And Johnny Clayton has won multiple times on the European tour. And those were obviously in front of a crowd. So to say that not having crowd made a big difference for him would be wrong. So it's impossible to know whether these three players would have won those three events if there was a crowd. But they've all shown that they can win in front of a crowd, especially Clayton and Vandenberg. So I think it would be unfair to them to say that this helped them. They would have been just as capable, and I would say just as likely to have won, even if there were a couple thousand screaming fans there.
Yeah, I think it is a tricky one, and I think when the events did start to come back behind closed doors, there was a lot of talk about it being a factor. But I think, as we've seen, it's not been as big a factor as I thought it would be. And look back to when the World Match Play came back, that was the first TV event to come back behind closed doors. And we were saying now we're going to find out how important the crowd is for players when they're getting up on that stage, because there's a variety of factors. The pressure that players have when they get up there, the TV cameras, knowing that there's a big audience worldwide watching their every dart. You've got the money as well. The prize money is bigger than it's ever been before. The rewards for winning darts matches, it's never been as big as it is right now. The crowd, obviously, that's been taken away. And then maybe even a fourth factor as well, your opponent, how well he plays. We've seen that even at the weekend. Johnny Clayton, 9-6 down, runs off 4 legs. James Wade averaged 120 in those last 4 legs and didn't even get a match start in those 4 legs to get over the line. So if your opponent is playing out of their skin, it's pretty hard to beat them. But I think we're seeing as well, whenever you get a new name on a TV trophy, as we've seen, we've had a great run of it recently, Johnny Clayton being the last one, but each time we see it, it's not just giving them confidence that now they can do that and they can do it again and again, but all the other players on the tour as well, because they've beaten them players before. They'll think, well, if he can do it, then I can do it as well. And the dominance of former players, Phil Taylor era, Michael Van Gerwen era, it's not there anymore, and it's more open than it's ever been before. And I think that's a big factor as well. We've got more players playing well, capable of putting in them big averages, big performances, and the top player, Michael Van Gerwen, as he was back then, his levels dropped, and it's made it a lot more exciting now.
And we'll have one more question. This one comes from Joe, and he asked something that in some ways I've suggested, but hypothetically, would you rather cancel the UK Open and do an Australian Open with fans, doing the same protocols as the Tennis Australian Open, which for those who don't follow tennis, the players had to go a few weeks earlier in quarantine for 2 weeks, and some of them were allowed out to just practice on a tennis court, but otherwise had to stay in their hotel room for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we've come up with some crazy ideas on this show. We said the World Championship. I said they should stage it in Dubai outside. You said put it in Australia, New Zealand, where you can get a crowd. And when we see the Australian Open tennis, I think it gets underway next week. But I believe from what I last saw, they're going to have up to 30,000 people in attendance for it. When you're seeing those big crowds at events, the PDC will be taking notice. Barry Hearn, Matt Porter, all the team, they will be watching that and thinking, maybe we could put an event on over there. And there's a lot of hoops, a lot of hurdles to jump through, but there's one thing that we can say about the PDC the last 12 months. They are willing to do it. They are willing to put events on during a pandemic, put the prize money on as it usually is. Taking the players out to Australia, it's a difficult one to see what event they would do. I think a UK Open would be too many players for them to do it. My idea that I thought of about half an hour ago, so I haven't really thought it through that much, but the Premier League, why not put the first staging of it, the first 8-9 nights, whatever it is, in Australia? You take out all the players there. You've only got to take 10 players out there. Do it on consecutive nights. You've got 8 or 9 nights. Get the big crowds in, and then once we get further down the line, once those 9 nights are out of the way, you've only got 7 or 8 left to do. Hopefully, we'll have more of a chance of getting crowds back here in the UK and around Europe. So that's my suggestion, Barry Hearn, and everyone listening. Let's get the first stage of the Premier League over to Australia, where we can have the big crowds.
And not a bad suggestion. I've said do the World Series events now, in February or March, while the season was delayed. But obviously, it doesn't look like that's going to become the case. But we also, you don't know how quickly things might change. I mean, Perth has been in lockdown for 5 days over one case of a hotel worker who worked at one of the quarantine hotels getting COVID. So things can change even in Australia really quickly. But I think I agree with you. Bringing over 128 tour card holders plus 32 other players to play in that event is a bit much. I mean, the World Championships is also a bit much, but there was so much money on the line, and it's for an extended period of time anyway, that I think it could have worked to make sure there was a crowd and just get everyone over at the beginning of December. And and also there were players, who would have been coming from Asia and the Americas anyway that were going to have to travel a long way regardless. For a one weekend event like the UK Open, I think that's pushing it. I just don't see that as realistic. But yeah, I think the Premier League might not be a bad idea, and you could do the World Series events during that as well. But something in Australia made sense for this time of year, especially with the fact that you can't really do much anywhere else. Anything else for this week?
I should say thank you to our guests for joining us. Really appreciate their time. Thank you to everyone for listening. Best of luck to everyone who's going into Q School. I know there's a few of our listeners that are going to be playing in it, so wish you all the best. Hope it's a good week for you, and we've got a few extra interviews that are going to be coming out over the next week or so with some of the players that are going to be involved, so keep an eye out for that on your feed wherever you're listening to this. They'll be coming out very soon. Should give a shout out as well to the guys that support us on Patreon. Andrew Dugan, who's part of the Hang Tight Club, everyone who supports us on there, supports us on our Ko-fi page. That's the one-off donation if you want to do that. We really appreciate your support, and we'll be back very soon.
Yes, indeed. And this one pains me, but I have to congratulate the winner of the trivia question for last week. And that was Jake Fuel, who said, when I mentioned to him, he said, "Can't wait to hear my shout out to my fourth favorite person in the car from Barnsley to Colchester." Of course, Jake is one of the Pro Tour markers, and probably fifth favorite person in the car, really. There were only 4 people there. But congrats to Jake for getting that right. And now we'll head over to our producer, Hannah, who has this week's question.
This week's trivia question comes from Andy Scott. And his question is, who are the 2 ever-presents at Q School? Who are the 2 ever-presents at Q School?
If you want to answer the question, just tweet us at Weekly Dartscast. First person to get the answer who hasn't already won the trivia competition will get a shout out on next week's show. Thank you all for listening. Thanks, as Alex said, to our Patreons, to our sponsors, to everyone. We'll be back. Well, I shouldn't say next week's show. We'll be back in 2 weeks because there isn't anything to talk about other than the ongoing Q School. And if we had a show next week, by the time we finished recording it, it would already be dated. And by the time you listened, it would be even more dated. So we're going to take next week off, but we'll be back the following week to recap Q School and look ahead to the first Super Series. Until then, you're just going to have to hang tight and enjoy Q School.